In this video, I'm going to move into the interpretation of Tablet 4 of the Enuma Elish. I'll post a link below to the first videos that I've done. It's a sequence. And frankly, it is not, it might not look smooth to people watching from the outside. There's something nested in here. And honestly, I'm kind of following that and figuring it out as I go along. I feel like I have a fair amount of it figured out, but there's a lot of layers still there that I fumble with. But in teaching it, I learn more. So that's what I'm doing. But here's a way I want to look at this material. I've talked about this before, but this idea continues to grow with me, and I'm realizing a mental place that I think it would help us to understand the material if we really focus in on what their life is like and what they're doing. And then we begin to understand how this material fits into their life. And then if we go to look at it and understand it, or try to understand it with that in mind, I think it will help us find what is in there. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome to the video, and let's talk about that for a little bit. So what I want to suggest is that long ago when I started looking at this material, I really struggled with it quite a bit. I think everybody does. It's very weird. Doesn't make sense. How does it fit? Why does it sound like other things? And there's a reason for that. There's that nested template, the hero's journey template, which is located in there. Once you find that and get in, you start realizing what's going on. And then it's just a matter of decoding the analogs that they're using. But this is what life is like in their culture that is different from ours. You know, first of all, we have all of this media in our life, are busy, the way things are, and we tend to think from that position. And that is that's a step that I think if we get past that and look at something, that is one thing we can do to help us access the material. So I have gone to great lengths to create a place in my imagination that I believe is as close as I can get to what life would have been like back then. And this is 4,000 years ago. We have humans with our kind of intelligence, but no media. We're out of the Stone Age. We're in this period of development, of growth, of emerging, where the population is booming. But infrastructure is developing, agriculture is developing, more and more people are around, the population is growing. We need to do something with all of the people, and this is kind of what's happening back then. There's a lot of people living in areas that need a structure, laws, rules, conduct, beliefs, some sort of structure that helps them coexist together in a belief system. So that is a part of what all of the teachings are to help include. Now, within that population, the most common of us don't read or write. There's no material to read. They are putting things on clay tablets at this point. They haven't even got papyrus figured out. But what I'm going to talk about is that template first that emerges. It's a self-healing template that is when you have decided to go on an inner healing path, that we're emerging from a very tough place. We come from difficult places, and we want to rise above that and have a good life. How do we do that? And we can teach people how to do that, how to forgive, how to let your past go. But that's, again, we're in a culture that people don't have media. Imagine life, getting up in the morning and you don't even go start coffee or anything like that. Whatever you do comes from a stone home, a hearth, oil maybe, flames. You go to work, you walk someplace, and you do whatever you do, and you're trying to work in such a way that, I'm sure they don't have jobs and systems like that in place that like we have today. You know, you find out what your trade is, what you do, you go figure out how to dye cloth or how to weave cloth or how to cut wood or how to carve rocks or make bricks or things like that. That is where we are in life. And at the end of the day, and throughout the day, you're not listening to anything but each other, or you're thinking through stuff. Ever go camping where there's no resources around? Primitive? Imagine worse than that, because when you're primitive camping, you have technology with you that they never had. Yeah, that's everyday life all the time. These stories are incredibly important. They're important to our life. They're important to our culture. They're important to the success and the future of our people. We are emerging. We're building. We're growing. We're building ziggurats. We're building bricks. We're looking for pride. And the story is written in such a way to contain some of that, as well as some magical, mystical elements that are fun to play with. While internally, there is a self-healing template in there that is starkly simple. However, it is contained in analogous stories that are intensely rich. Think of a humongous version of a fable, The Tortoise and the Hare. Long story, short moral. Short, slow and steady wins the race. These are spiritual ones. Huge stories, small lessons inside. And that's what we're going to be finding in here. And we'll find this across the board. This is it's the most complete prototype, I think, of the hero's template that I find. Gilgamesh had it in there as well, but it's so fragmented. It's kind of, this is really the first one. Even this has some chunks missing from it, but you can see what is in this one. So here we are. We're now passing this around. This is our media. We go to plays. We go to, that's their movies. That's what they do. They go watch people. They listen, and then those build off from one story to another that they network like we're watching television shows, our favorite kind of stuff, while it's teaching things and teaching us pride, except it's back then and it's all being done by stories and verbally. I think we're probably all in an age now where we don't remember barn dances and things like that. I remember them from movies, Westerns or something like that, Little House on the Prairie kind of stuff. That before we had media, before we had radio and television, people would get together and you would have community centers in a town where people would get together and have dances and activities and do different things like that, because that was what they had. And those were very important parts of the community and people sharing. Today, what has happened is we have gotten media, and we have been able to, we can violate time and space today. They couldn't back then. They had to be together at the same place at the same time to communicate. We don't have to anymore. We don't bounce off of each other. You can watch this. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm talking to my camera. When you're looking at this, I'm off hiking someplace with my dog. By the time that works out, we can do things today that I think actually isolate us from what they were doing, and we have to know that. Okay, let's do a very short review of the first tablets that we've done before we get into to start on this one. In tablet number 1 was creation. That is where we come about. It talks about this emergence from the all. But when we play that out in the psyche, that part of all of these teachings represents our beginning. That is our creation. That is the creation of us and the creation of our experience in the universe. It's not about the creation of the universe, but our connection with it. So we emerge from the all. It begins to separate. It shows how we become our initial selves to begin with. When we're not aware, we're creating offspring, which are analogs for living life and picking up bad qualities, characteristics, and that these act out, and that there's nothing you can do to stop them. But as you move along, you're trying to resolve it. You want your past to be okay, but it's not. You go after it. It sends you back. It takes over. We've built up to this point where we are now creating. We've got to the point where we realize, okay, we need to do something different. So we're creating a hero, Marduk, that's going to go in and defeat our demons, to fight what is in there. What we have is Tiamat emerging from here. Not Tiamat herself, but the characteristics within Tiamat, the gods, the raucous gods. Those represent our early characteristics, our anger, our hate, our shame, our drinking, our whatever it is in us that acts out, that when it does, we don't have control over it. That's why they're given God status, because they are in charge of us when they act out. They're going to have to be defeated later. Anyway, we're now creating Marduk to go do this, and that is where we kind of ended up. This person that has, double eyes, double ears, can see more expansive, more capacity, stronger, whatever. There's this isolation happening where not many people are going to do this. There's a selection process happening that is going to emerge in the hero's journey as the very first step. Eventually, is that you're selected, and there will not be many that are selected. So that's represented here in this story in an early version, it looks like to me. Okay, so now let's get right into tablet 4 and see where we left off, remembering that these are huge stories playing out inside. That creation in the beginning, that's me at birth. I grow up, I develop all these characteristics, I act out. All these stories are richly carrying that inner teaching that if I play it out in my psyche, I see what it is. And all the layers and all the pieces are different different parts of us at different times. When I was born, I was one thing. As I grew, I became something different. As I became aware, I'm called something different. As I became angry, I'm called something different. As I want to go back and stop myself, I'm called something different. As if I go back and try to stop myself and don't succeed, that's given another name. All of these are parts playing out inside of us that just represent parts of our psyche that are trying to heal and interact with ourself inside. To me, the analogs appear to be nouns and verbs, and once we play them out in the psyche, we see what actual effect they have. Instead of reading the words, we make a conversion and play them out in the psyche. Let's just keep going along and see how that works. All right, at the end of Tablet 3, we had just established that Marduk was going to be the one who is going to go in and take over and defeat the enemy for us, and we are looking for a single-minded, a single destiny, a single one thing. We're looking for happiness. We're looking for something that we're going to see what they call it here. Everybody's looking for a happiness at the end of the story. They got one here too. Then for his use, they constructed for him a royal palace, and he occupied it as ruler of his forebears, who declared, "You, who are most revered among all of the high gods, your life is magnificent, your speech has the force of Anu." Let's stop right there so we don't get too far away from wrapping ourselves up in this story. We are talking to and we're developing our higher being. Marduk is that part of us that is going to be able to go and look at our pain and shame from a detached perspective, but also to go back and manage to, what is an enemy? An enemy is going to be, I'm ashamed of something. I'm never going to talk about it. That's the real enemy that is acting out. What is Marduk? Marduk is the one that goes to the conscious and says, let's go in and deal with this. We're going to look at that. How did you get molested? We're going to go through and try to figure out how to resolve the pain that we feel from it so that it ceases to become a part of us. This is what is going to be emerging and why it is so difficult to go through this process and why it is nested in something. We're going to have to go and interact with our memories, which are the real enemies that we need to defeat. If we want to change our life and get to this place they're bringing us to, that's what we have to do, is defeat those enemies. When we go back up here, we're seeing that they are the most revered among all of the high gods. Out of all of the characteristics that you've had that you think you're in charge, this is the one that is the most revered. This is the one that's going to bring you to enlightenment. All right, and I say these are rich, and they are. Then for his use, they constructed for him a royal palace. The royal palace is always going to be a place, a council chambers, bridal chamber, temple containing a holy and a holy of holies. Some way, somehow, there's representation of parts of your mind up here. The royal palace is the place where whoever is in charge gets to live. So we are at this point preparing ourselves to go back and deal with things. This is going to come into supernatural aid in the template of the hero's journey, but right here we have supernatural is the entire story, actually. So we don't need to get supernatural aid. We are supernatural in this story. And of course, and it goes on to say he occupied it as ruler of his forebears. So this means that I am now taking over my mind from my previous self who didn't do a good job of it. It's time for me to take over. It's time for me to stop letting my past live rent-free, as it were, in the mind. Okay, I feel very comfortable that I'm hooked into this story, and I feel very much what's going on in the story and how it's playing out in my mind. So let's go ahead and just start moving along then. I'll start from the beginning just to get back into the flow, and I'll continue on. Then for his use, they constructed for him a royal palace, and he occupied it as ruler of his forebears, who declared, "You, who are most revered among all of the high gods, your life is magnificent, your speech has the force of Anu." We'll have to go back and get Anu later. That's another layer. There's some powerful previous part of us. Marduk, you are the most revered of any of the high gods. Your life is magnificent. Your speech... Oh, I did that already. Yeah, your speech has the force of Anu. Well, let's look at that for a minute, because it doubled. You are the most revered among all of the high gods. Okay, so it says you, and then one time it says you, and then one time it says Marduk. See the difference there? That'll mean something. That's going to mean something, and I'm not sure right now. I didn't catch that till just now. You see how it grows as I go. Your life is magnificent. Your speech has the force of Anu. From henceforth, your commands will never be distorted. You hold the power to both raise up and to compel down. You can create things inside of you, and you can stop the stuff that is emerging. You are going to be something different than your previous self. Those things that used to act out are not going to be act out when your consciousness becomes more aware, when you become your Marduk. Let your proclamations be law, and let your words be true, and not a single god will supersede the boundaries you set. Let there be an account created in support of your estate. Remembering the gods are the characteristics that we have picked up that act out. We don't want, let not a single god will supersede the boundaries you set. Yeah, we are no longer going to act outside of what we have decided. See this emerging here? It's all psychology, isn't it? And then it moves on, like those required for the gods' temples where they stand. You, Marduk, are our defender. You, Lord, are our defender. We must bestow upon you rule over the entire cosmic order. When seated in the council, your words are second to none. Let it be that your weapons never stray from their targets. Before I move on, I'm going to go back here for a second. You, Marduk, are our defender. You, Lord, are our defender. Lord Marduk. They're doing that mix-up thing again. Yeah, there's something in there. You must bestow upon you rule over the entire cosmic order. Here's the cycles that are coming in. Look at that. It's not just a repeat story right there. It's telling us there's cyclical. You must take rule over what is cyclically happening. We begin to recognize that patterns emerge. Nikola Tesla, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in energy, frequency, and something, cycles, waves. Everything moves in waves. We recognize at some point that we are acting out in patterns and that we need to interrupt those patterns. We haven't been in control of them. Now we see Marduk as being given rule over that entire cosmic order. When seated in the council, your words are second to none. Let it be that your weapons never stray from their targets, but rather let it be that your weapons crush your enemies. So we need to defeat what's coming after us. This emerges in the Gospel of Thomas. When you know the strong man is coming, you practice and get ready and defeat them when they come. Lord, be merciful towards the one who puts his faith in you, but also diminish the life of any god who is a worker of evil. Yeah, get rid of the bad stuff. Drink, whatever, hate, hurt, something. Anything that interferes with you feeling good is considered evil. Evil is not that's an analog too, and it literally means anything that prevents you from your destination. Yeah, this is black and white. Then they placed amongst themselves a single constellation. Yeah, one cycle. We want one thing repeating over and over, not a bunch of stuff. I still think it's important sometimes to bring in parallels because it keeps showing where the pattern emerges and how it emerges in other places. And what does Buddha say right at the very first verse in the Dhammapada, the first two verses, and they're dual verses. They exist in a dichotomy, back and forth, showing duality. And the first one says that all that we are is the result of what we have thought. And this is not our conscious mind. This is the subconscious. So this is what is stored in there. What we are is the result of what we have thought and put away and stored in there. And if we have evil thoughts or things that take us from nirvana in that case, then pain follows us, like the wheel that follows the ox that draws the carriage, showing it cyclically. The pain keeps coming around and around. There's a cycle that's not okay. Now, what happens in the dichotomy, though, is that all we are is a result of what we have thought. And if we've thought pure thoughts, we've cleared out, we've gotten rid of all that, then happiness follows us like a shadow that never leaves. We're now in one cycle of happiness. And this is emerging as the same thing, one cycle. You see how they look obscure in verbiage, but if you play them out and let them become what they mean inside of you, that they become the same thing. That's the trick of it. That's the trick of it. Only some people can do that. And yeah, that's in the material too. Only some people can do it. Lord, may your proclamations be miraculous to the gods. Speak orders for both destruction and for the renewal. You are interrupting cycles and changing them and creating new ones. Getting rid of old habits, making new habits. Starkly simple. Scary simple. All right, on board with the constellations being cycles, seeing how that's happening, let's move right into the next one and see what it just moves into, and let's just flow with it. So proclaim to it that the constellation may then disappear. Proclaim to it yet again that the constellation be seen again. Upon speaking at his utterance, the constellation disappeared. Speaking again at his utterance, the constellation reappeared. When his forebears, the gods, observed the power of his words, then they cried out in jubilation, declaring Marduk is king. So right here, he made something start and made something stop. He was able to stop one outburst and create something different instead. Is Marduk king? Yeah. Then bestowed unto him the scepter, throne, and staff of rule. He's the guy that you need in charge, that we need in charge. We need Marduk taken over. Yeah, we do. And into his hand an unbeatable weapon to destroy his enemy. Then they cheered, march forth, and sever the life of Tiamat. May the winds carry her blood here to declare good tidings. Then his forebears, the gods, pronounced the fate of the Lord, encouraging him to embody ideals of measure and restraint. Encouraging him to embody ideals of measure and restraint. Marduk created a bow, and this he fashioned to be his weapon, then fletched the arrow with feathers and set it onto the string. Raising aloft a mace that he held within his rigid right hand, slinging the bow over his arm, setting the quiver at his side. With lightning before him, eternal flame burning within him. He also fashioned a net, which he could use to encircle Tiamat. He mastered the four winds so that she might have no escape. South wind, north wind, east wind, and west wind. He took gifts from his father Anu that were kept at hand. With the net, he generated the terror gust, the tempest, and the whirlwind, 4 gales and 7 winds, the tornado and the hurricane. Setting forth the 7 he had made, they followed behind. The Lord raised his mighty mace called the flood weapon, before mounting his awesome fear-rearing storm chariot. Harnessed to it was a quartet that had been strapped to it, one called Killer, another Merciless, also Fleet and High Flyer. And their jaws were lowered, their teeth filled with venom. They knew nothing of giving up. They knew only of attack. To the right of him, he positioned both Blitzkrieg and Clasher, and on the left, he put another named Total Extermination. Then, dressed in a drapery of the most formidable armoring, upon his head was a halo blazing forth with a blinding glow. So the Lord thus set forth and traveled upon the roadway, heading in the direction of Tiamat, who rampaged wildly. Upon his tongue he held a spell, an incantation on his lips, holding within his hand a herb for protection against toxins. They all gathered about him, the gods amassed around him. His forebears gathered about him. They amassed around him. Then the Lord came near, setting his sights on Tiamat's heart, and attempted to divine the stratagem of Kingu, her partner. I'm going to stop right here and let's talk about it. I kind of stretched that one out. Sometimes I think once you get hooked into the story, it's easier to let it flow a little bit. I think we can kind of see what's going on is that we are creating within ourselves all of the necessary components to go do battle. There's going to be a variety of ways of teachings. There's frequencies, winds. I don't know what the creation of all those are. The 4 winds to whirl things out. What we're basically looking to do is take our memories, whatever is up in here and all of the issues that we have, and wipe it out. And what they're doing is creating tools that are going to be necessary on this journey to take care of that. There's a flood, kind of a thing that's happening. Where does that come from? 4 horses. Where does that appear later? Yeah, there's a lot of elements in here that we can look at, and these are actually things that they're analogous weaponry that we are creating metaphorically to go back and destroy our earlier selves, the parts of us that act out that we don't have control of, that we picked up along the way, and we need to find those parts and get rid of them. There are weeds, demons, whatever. In this case, yeah, they're the old gods, the bad gods. Kingu is in charge. That is your old self. That is the self that doesn't want to give up. That's the person that you are when you're out of control. That's Kingu. Well, Marduk is your new self going back to take over from your old self. And Tiamat is the subconscious. This is the part of us that holds all of those things. It's going to always be there holding something. It's what Tiamat is holding is the problem. That has to be changed. That cycle, all of that is where all of this is coming from, and the cycles are coming from, and everything needs to be interrupted and changed. The weaponry, I'm sure in their culture, if you think about it, these are story things. There's probably not just one story. There's probably all kinds of stories that are filtering in and they're going throughout the people on a regular basis. And that these things are something that are thousands of years ago. It was something that was a part of their stories. There's probably something else to them. The four winds and things like that may specify something differently. There was when we created it, the five beams. I get this idea that construction is made out of wood, five trees, 5 beams. We're trying to create something new. They're just throwing in a lot of bits and pieces and parts to help people find what is there. This simple template is very richly carried in something that we would want it to be like this, and we would want it even bigger and wilder. We'd want more of this. I think that these are really just fun for us. At the same time, at any point in time, it's carrying the lesson that we can use to turn inward. We have access to it at any point in time that we want to. It's right there. So this is right in our culture. It's available. And whoever our philosophers and teachers are have built this in such a way that it helps us live our physical life. At the same time, it's available to anybody who's ready to take an inner path. Okay, then, where does that put us in the story? So far in this chapter or in this tablet, we have established a place for Marduk, made sure that Marduk is in charge, know that Marduk is the only one, single-minded, well-established, with weapons now ready to go do battle. We've made all the preparations to go deal with our past self. And we are now ready to go, and this is actually where the next step is. We are ready to address King U, or this is where this is coming into play. The new self, ready? The old self. Let's see what happens at the clash. Okay, right where we left off is that the Lord came near, setting his sights on Tiamat's heart. He was ready to go in, but as King U gazed out at him, his mind became bewildered, and his fortitude fell to pieces. His actions became awkward. As for his allies, the gods, those who had gone along with him, when looking at his chief, the contender, they grew anxious. But Tiamat worked her magic, with no need to avert her gaze. Within her mouth there resided lies, deception, and cunning. Just how strong is this army you have with you, Lord of Gods? The whole collection of them holds near to your own location. But the Lord held up his fearsome weapon, the flood weapon, conveying his words to Tiamat, who feigned kindness, saying, "For what reason do you display this superficial benevolence, when in your heart of hearts you generated a force for war? Only because your sons the gods were making such a noise, only because they have been inconsiderate of their forebears. But why ought you, who gave them birth, not forgive them?" And right here, this is Marduk replying. It just doesn't say that. "You chose King U to be your partner and also your war leader, bestowing unto him the Anu power which he does not deserve, and acted in enmity toward Anshar, honored king of gods. Thus you have multiplied the evils done against my forebears. So make your army ready, equipped with what arms you have." Okay, are we still in on this? Are we still seeing everything here? I see that the battle is getting ready to start, but there's this fun kind of a story going on, this interplay between our conscious and our subconscious, of the struggle that we have in trying to go back and deal with these things. This is kind of like a precursor in the template where you're in the hero's journey template, struggling to leave the past behind, or denial of the call. It's kind of a version of that where we're arguing internally with ourselves. Okay, let's move on and see how this unfolds. Marduk had just told her to either get her army ready or step forward yourself that we might engage one-on-one. As soon as Tiamat had heard this speech that he had given, she went ballistic and flew into a wild and unstoppable rage. With no little emotion, Tiamat bawled at the top of her lungs, and her viscera trembled altogether to her very foundation. Undeterred in discharging her magic, she then spoke spells. At the same time, the warriors were busy honing their blades. Tiamat and Marduk, defender of the gods, faced one another, moving towards each other, preparing for the coming clash. The Lord unleashed his net and cast it out to entrap Tiamat. He called from behind him the terror gust to fly in her face. Tiamat figured to open her mouth so as to swallow the wind. But the great force of the terror gust kept her mouth open. The raging winds bloated her belly. She spread her jaws wide. Marduk released an arrow which struck her distended middle. Then he cleaved her into 2 pieces and cut open her heart, having defeated her, thus bringing her hateful life to an end, tossing her down onto the dirt and setting his feet upon her. And after this, when he had killed their war leader, Tiamat, he caused their legions to disperse. Her army was in disarray, and the gods who were her allies, who had stood beside her, all of them shook in fear, were struck with terror, and fled. Yet he allowed them to give themselves up, sparing them, since they were at once encircled and not allowed to escape. So he had them bound and destroyed all of their weaponry. And they were trapped within a net, and there they remained. Then they shrank back, overcome as they were by despair. But they endured this affliction of being held incarcerated, and concerning the several demons emitting deadly beams, these being the army of creatures who passed to her right, he attached unto them nose leashes and bound their limbs. Then he crushed underfoot their foul instruments of warfare. Regarding King U, who was the highest ranked among them, he ruined him, adding him to the tally of the other defeated, seizing from him the tablet of fate, which he did not deserve, and impressed upon it his own seal, clasping it at his chest. Then after he had overcome and destroyed his adversaries, announcing that the defeated enemy were now his slaves, he provoked a song of victory of Anshar over all of his foes. Realizing the plans which were formulated by Nudimmud, the warrior Marduk now dominated the incarcerated gods. To Tiamat he now turned his attention, the one he had caught, and the Lord Marduk trod upon the lower parts of her body. Raising his merciless hammer high, he pulverized her skull, then sliced open the arteries that carried her watery blood. He caused the north wind to take it, to convey good tidings. When his forebears saw it, they were jubilant and all sang out, then made plans to meet him with presents, gifts of greeting. The Lord took a moment to rest and looked over her corpse. He split the monster's cadaver and made marvelous things, severing it up in the middle, flaying it in half like a drying fish, one of which he thrust up to make the vault of the heavens. He drew a gate in front of it, put into the care of a guardian. Her waters were bounded so that they might not surge free, and he went forth traversing the sky, seeking a holy place. He made the Apsu, Nudimmud's dwelling, entirely smooth, and the Lord then measured out the Apsu's total dimensions. The immense shrine which he built to resemble it was Ashara, and in the temple Ashara, which he made to resemble heaven, there he placed the centers of veneration for Anu, Enlil, and Ea. All right, did you read a personal death and rebirth in that? Let's go take a look at some things. There's a lot of fun stuff in here. There is just some incredible things, including the prototype to Sheol, Jewish hell. We go back or step forward yourself. So he was going to fight her. She freaks out. This is when we go in to deal with ourselves, how difficult it is. We see that coming out. The Lord unleashed his net, cast it, trapped. What we are doing is actually we need to destroy our old self. But our old self, the Tiamat here that we're trying to destroy, is that part of us that wants to protect things. It's not the part that acts out. It's the part that wants to, it's the walls. It's the fear. It's the things that say, please leave it alone. I don't I don't want to bother with it. In this case, it looks like it's a protective mother wanting to protect offspring, but in reality, that's analogous to our subconscious that is trying to hold on to the things that are in there that are not good things. What is that? That's fear. Tiamat may be fear more than subconscious. It's a both. That's our subconscious in fear. He caused their legions to disperse, but her army was in disarray. And the gods who were her allies, who had stood before her, all of them shook in fear and struck with terror and fled. Yet he allowed them to give themselves up, sparing them, since they were at once encircled and not allowed to escape. So he had them bound and destroyed of all their weaponry. These are very specific. We're going to see these. And they were trapped within the net, and there they remained. Then they shrank back, overcome as they were by despair. But they endured this affliction of being held incarcerated. What is that? We have demons with a charge. They act out. This is the idea that you have a memory of an event and an emotional charge of the event. And the emotional charge is the real creature that's acting out. And that once you destroy that emotional charge, the memory is still there. The creature, or the original memory, is still in place. That is what is encircled. Those are inside of us. They're not allowed to escape. We cannot get rid of those memories. They cannot go away. They're always there. We have to destroy what they are, though. Destroying their weaponry is destroying their emotional state, their fear. What it is that gives them their power to act out and hurt us is their weaponry. That is what we're destroying. They became trapped within a net. So they're in a part of our psyche now that are there, that are, your charge isn't there. You can't leave. Your memories, you shrank back, overcome by despair. Not going to act out anymore. Not going to fear anymore. Not going to continue to be afraid or angry or whatever it is for us. Ours. Those are still there. They're being incarcerated, and that's what I believe is the precursor to Sheol. It's not a hell where you go punish. It's a place where your offspring that have been removed of their emotional charge are still, it's your memories that you're going to have for the rest of your life that, yeah, these things happened one time. No big deal. We're getting rid of them anyway. They're not a big deal. And concerning the several demons emitting deadly beams, these being the army of creatures who passed to her right, he attached unto them nose leashes and bound their limbs. Then he crushed underfoot their foul instruments of warfare. Who are these parts of us? These are the parts of us that work in concert with the fears that were once there. This is the smashing holes in walls, banging things, screaming, yelling, threatening, whatever it is. These need to have nose rings put in them. They got to be taken charge of. They cannot be allowed to act out. Then he crushed underfoot their foul instruments of warfare. Colorful verbiage. We need to resolve our issues. We need to examine them. He ruined them, adding, regarding Kingu, who was the highest ranked among them, he ruined him, adding him to the tally of the other defaulted, seizing from him the table of fate. So now, whatever is going to be acting out in the background is no longer in Kingu's hands. We are now taking that table of fate, tablet of fate, from the past and saying, this will no longer happen. You don't have charge anymore. Then it says he announced that the defeated enemy were now his slaves. So all of these things have gone from gods to slaves that have no power anymore, which indicates that they have been taken care of. They've been healed. They've been put to rest. Literally, if we try to translate that to something interactive in the psyche, that's it right there. Nothing else. We're healing ourselves. And these instances were given birth to at the time that they happened and the time that we decided what they were and put them away. That is what we're resolving in all of these. Realizing the plans which were formulated by Enuma, the warrior Marduk now dominated the incarcerated gods. I'm in charge. Enuma, that's another part of us at one point in time. I'm not sure. I have to go look through it again more times. I don't think I want to chase it down. That's a part of us that at some point said, I have to take care of something. Let's get going. Let's make a plan. Figure it out. Send Marduk to go do it. Anytime they can find a place to change an outlook, they just create another person there To Tiamat, he now turned his attention, the one that had caught it. So he destroys her pretty much, pulverizes her skull, destroys whatever is in her head at that point. The watery blood, I'm not sure. North wind, yeah. I don't know how that's culturally something there. Basically what they're saying is that we are wiping out the old, that this old part of us is no longer existence, and they're putting it in ways that are probably closer to their understanding than they are to ours. But if we step back, the big picture, that's what's happening in the template, despite the fact that there may be more details in here. Then he splits her, vault, top, bottom, draws a gate in front of it in the care of a guardian. This is the creation of a new self and the creation of the gateway, the narrow gate, the clashing rocks, the opening of the Dead Sea. All of these are going to be analogous to a passageway from the conscious to the subconscious, a narrow that's being guarded. Her waters were now bounded so that they might not surge free. She is no longer allowed to just gush all over the place. They are no longer being manipulated by the out-of-control raucous gods. He made the Apsu, Nudabad's dwelling, entirely smooth. These are up here. Apsu, Nudabad's dwelling, entirely smooth. Must have been rough, must have been bad. We're healing. We're taking this place that was once a cave of jagged rocks all over the place and making it so it's smooth. I don't know. I'm trying to create imagery here and see what they're doing. And then the Lord then measured out the Apsu's total dimensions, the size, the immensity, the immense shrine which he built to resemble it was Ashara. So we've gone from, he placed the centers of veneration for Ea, Elul, Anu, Elul, and Ea. And these have been parts along the way that seem to be creation and other gods that are parts of us. Yeah, you see how thick it gets. Step back and look at the big parts. I'm growing with it still. I see what is emerging from here, and I see that there are things that I don't have access to it yet in here, but that they are accessible. I see that it would just take studying them and learning what those parts are to them in this psyche, but then going to the template and just looking at it, restructuring it, it emerges. It comes out this way, but it's told in the most wonderful way. Look at this story to tell your population who wants stories. They love you for this, yeah. Well, that kind of wraps up this tablet, but let's do a review of what we've covered so far, just kind of a brief one right here. Right off in the beginning in the tablet starts off with the creation, that we emerge from a place of all potential, and that whatever we come from, this kind of takes the path of the idea that our early life is that gods take over. This represents the part of our life where we are putting away experiences, not dealing with them, not managing them. Things are okay at first. We can kind of work around them, but as life goes on, they compound, they get bigger. As we get older, they get bigger. And at some point, we may want to resolve those issues. But in the meantime, the story is showing that by having something acting out, and they're gods, they're in charge. You're the one that has to resolve them. You have to create a part of yourself that has the strength to go back and do it. We're seeing a failure in there where something's getting sent back. We're seeing cycles emerging, how things come about repetitively. That we must have some sort of weaponry that we're going and destroying this with, that changes who and what we are actually. It's a rebirth, and it's letting us know that we are at a point in life where if we're on this path, we can go in and destroy those characteristics by interacting with them, but that they stay in there. But we are now in charge. They are not in charge anymore. We have switched from living life unaware, having things act out, to aware, realizing what is going on. And you're no longer, what is inside of you is no longer dictating your life. You are now dictating what happens there. You've taken charge by realizing you can be aware of it and watching it. And that is where we got to so far in these. Well, from here forward, we have 3 tablets left, and I'm looking forward to that. I hope you enjoyed this. I get something out of it every time. Yeah, this helps me grow just to do this. Love one another, and I'll see you in the next video.